Hello students, in this video we will look into another aspect of handling precipitation data which deals with averaging precipitation over given catchment or watershed. So let us say that we are in a watershed and we have some rain gauges installed within that watershed, and we have been asked to calculate the mean depth of precipitation over entire watershed, and this watershed spans over certain area of a kilometer square. Now, when we have to look into the number of rain gauges, there are two important aspects that we have to look into. That first one is what is the variability associated with the storm for which we are measuring the precipitation average. Second is what is the packing density of these rain gauges. So, for example, let us say that we are looking at Ganga River Basin, and in some parts, that is in northern parts, the density of rain gauges is very high. But when we go to mountainous area, number of rain gauges drop drastically because of difficulties posed by terrain, and hence we have less number of samples to account for, and we should give more weight wherever the density is higher as compared to where density is lower. So we can say that if we have three rain gauges installed in a given area, that would have a better representative precipitation for the watershed as compared to one single rain gauge which is installed in isolation. Keeping these things in mind, we will define the methods to average the precipitation over watershed. Now, based on these 2 points, that one thing that we have to account for is what is the variability, and second one, what is the packing density of rainfall gauges. One thing is for sure, that the normal averaging, that if there are n rain gauges installed, while we can calculate the average over n rain gauges as P1 plus P2 plus P3, or all the way till n divided by n, this is not going to be a good method. Although if our terrain is plain, if variability is less, and density of rain gauges is more or less uniform, we can apply this simple averaging and get the average precipitation. But as you can imagine that in real world setting, all watersheds would have a lot of variability both from the precipitation context as well as rain gauge density aspect, and since in simple averaging would not work. To address these limitations, we would look into two new kind of methods. First one is called as the Thiessen polygon method. So I'm using number one because our number two here, because number one is simple averaging, number two is Thiessen polygon, and this is also known as methods of Voronoi polygon. And you will learn about Voronoi polygon or Thiessen polygon in your ArcGIS class, but here we will develop some intuition about that. So again, let us consider a rain gauge, and we have a watershed, and we have three rain gauges installed here. If you consider these 2 points, and we join all these three by some triangle. Now, the question here is, if we have to divide this into three areas where we are assigning that in that area, this rain gauge A is representing the average, here B is representing the average over that area, here C is representing average of that area, how we should do that? So what we will do is that we will draw the perpendicular bisectors of the lines that are joining these rain gauges are from the triangle. So we will go here, we will go here, and so on. And what we will do is that where these perpendicular bisectors would intersect the watershed boundary, that would be the end of that particular point. Similarly, here we have drawn it the boundary, and wherever they will intersect, what we will get is we will get some bounding area. So this is one bounding area that I am showing in red. There would be another bounding area that I am showing in blue, that would be associated with A, and finally there would be third bounding area that I am hatching in brown, which is associated with blue, with the station B. Now, if you clearly see here, what we are trying to do is we are trying to apply some understanding of basic geometry, that if we cross this perpendicular bisector, the point here would be more closer to A than C. As a result of which, we say that if point is closer to A in comparison to C and B, at that point representative precipitation should be same as what we observed at gauge A. Similarly, if you look at any point here, this point is closer to B, and when we are talking about distances, we are simply talking about Euclidean distances, which are given as x1 minus x2 square plus y1 minus y2 square and its square root, where x2 and y2 are the coordinates of our station under consideration. So for this point, let us say this point is x. We clearly see that distance of x from B is less than distance of x from A, and distance of x B is also less than distance of x from C, and hence we can use this as a representative value of precipitation in this area. So we typically carry out this Thiessen polygon exercise on a graph paper, and when we draw this watershed to scale and hatch this area, we should be able to calculate what is the area AC, what is the area AA, and what is the area AB, such that AC plus AB plus AA should be equal to total area of watershed, and based on that we can calculate the average amount of precipitation or equivalent depth over watershed as A1 times P1 plus A2 times P2 plus A3 times P3 divided by A1 plus A2 plus A3, where A1, A2, A3 are definitely areas that we hatched in red, blue and brown, and P1, P2, P3 are the amount of precipitation that we have recorded at the individual gauges. Also, you can think of these gauges as the seed and the area around that particular seed where all points are closer. We say that that is the area associated with the given Thiessen polygon or Voronoi polygon. Now, one of the limitations of Thiessen polygon method is that it is storm agnostic. So when we talk about storm agnostic, what it means? Agnostic means it does not care about the characteristic of storm. So it does not matter in which direction storm is moving, whether it's a convective precipitation, whether it's a stratiform precipitation, your Thiessen polygons are not going to change. And when we have different mechanisms resulting in the precipitation over a watershed, this Thiessen polygon may not be not very accurate when your terrain or relief is variable. Specifically, if you look at mountainous areas, this Thiessen polygon method does not account elevation in any way, and elevation interacts strongly with the precipitation or the storms passing through that area, and that's one limitation of Thiessen polygon method. On the other hand, when we talk about plains like northern plains or the Great Indian Plains, there we have more or less consistent variability in precipitation, and in those areas use of Thiessen polygon is recommended to measure the precipitation. Now this discussion can also be extended to multiple gauges within an area. So if instead of 3, which was the simplest case, let us say we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 precipitation gauges. Now what we will do, we will select 3 rain gauges at a time which are closest to each other, and we'll make triangles again. So one triangle like this, another triangle like this, third triangle like this, fourth triangle like this, fifth triangle like this. So we have divided our entire watershed into many areas, and again we will draw the perpendicular bisectors of all the lines that are present here, and based on the intersections of these perpendicular bisectors we will again assign areas. So I will leave this as an exercise for you in upcoming assignment. So if this is our gauge A, what we will do, we will say that this gauge A is surrounded by these perpendicular bisectors, and hence whatever points fall in this A region would be assigned to A, and similarly we will keep on finding the other areas, that is this would be associated with B, and some area would be associated with, if this is B, some area would be associated centrally and so on, but the concept remains same. Keep on drawing perpendicular bisectors of the closest triangles that you have formed and identify the area associated with each of those regions on piece of a graph paper. And when we are dealing with larger watersheds, there is a device called as planimeter. Planimeter is used to measure areas of the map. Before our computers were sophisticated or AutoCAD was not there, planimeters was used by hydrologists to measure these areas in the context of uh, these and polygons. And of course, drawing it to a smaller scale on a graph paper also serves the same purpose. Now, as I was saying, that one of the biggest limitations of Voronoi polygon is that it does not account for the variability. So how we can address or account for storm? And to do that, we use a method called as iso-Heitel method. I think in previous videos I mentioned that iso means same and Heitel represents, we talked about heitographs. So heights means related to precipitation. So what we do is same precipitation method where we try to draw the contours associated with storms and use that to calculate the average precipitation. For example, whenever a storm is passing over a watershed, it will have an eye, and this eye will have some level of uh, intensity associated with it. Let us say it is x1 centimeter is the depth of precipitation that has happened at certain distance uniformly from the eye. And now I am drawing this as a circle, but of course it would be not a regular shape, but for sake of understanding, let us assume that at certain distance r from center of the storm, amount of precipitation each point is receiving is x centimeter. As we keep on going away from the eye, the amount of precipitation will reduce such that we have x2 here where x2 is less than x1, and there would be more rings and so on. So we will measure precipitation here, that is, let us say that this is associated as xn centimeter if this is the nth ring that we have drawn, in a way that xn is less than xn minus 1 and it is less than x2, and x1 is the greatest value given that this is a particular storm that is passing over the watershed. We call this as an iso heights. And what we do is that we try to measure what is the area between two iso heights. So if we draw these iso heights again on graph paper to scale, we can easily measure how many grids are covered by the area that I have hatched in red, and we can simply say that average amount of precipitation that has happened into this area which is hatched in red can simply be given by x1 plus x2 centimeter, and we can keep on calculating this hatched areas x1 plus x2 divided by 2 because we are looking for the average precipitation happened in this ring. We can also take more rings and keep on saying that precipitation between any two rings represented enclosing x1 and x2 centimeter of precipitation is simply the arithmetic mean of these values of precipitation. And when we have to calculate the mean precipitation that could have happened, it would be simply given by average precipitation as A1 P1 plus A2 P2 all the way till AN PN divided by A1 plus A2 plus AN, where A is the area enclosed and P is the average amount of precipitation between two areas. So let us try to look this with more specific example, and this is an example that I'm taking from our textbook. So that is, let us say that there are different gauges labeled as D, C, E, some of them within the watershed, some of them outside the watershed, A, B, F, and we record a different amount of precipitation at these gauges. So D reported 12 centimeter of precipitation because of a storm, or 12 mm, sorry. So, and also C recorded 9.2 mm precipitation, E recorded 9.1 mm precipitation, at A we had 7.2, 7.1 mm, and at F we recorded 4 mm of precipitation because of a storm. It is very clear that I was somewhere here and storm was passing in this direction. And when we look at this 12 centimeter, what we will do is that we will try to locate these rings that we were trying to understand with help of this example. And we say that around the station, there is a ring associated with certain area. And now we have next measurement at C and E, which is of the value 9.2. What we do is that we try to linearly interpolate that as we are going away, how much precipitation would be here at certain distance, and we locate the next line, let us say 10 centimeter. We already have 9 and 7 here, so 8 would be somewhere here. Between 8 and 7, we would take the same values here. Between 4 and 8, we will locate 6 centimeter, and so on. So depending upon, we can always make finer interpolation, that directly jumping from 10 to 8 we can go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 and so on. But the idea is that all these points are generally kept equi-spaced. So 10, 12 to 10, 10 to 8, 8 to 6. And this is what we call as the ISO heights of precipitation. And when we complete that, they would look like a circle. That is, now we are just focusing on our watershed, which we are bounding with a red boundary here. But in reality, these would go all the way and enclose some big circles around that as when the storm passes. And now we are looking into measuring this area, which I am shading as A1. This area would be represented as A2. We will have this as A3, this as A4, and finally this smaller area, again I am highlighting in red, as A5. So we can measure this area, and the level of precipitation that would define this contour, which is in red, can simply be taken as 12. For blue, we can take value of 10 plus 12 divided by 2. For area represented in brown, we can take 10 plus 8 divided by 2 as the amount of precipitation, and we can keep on multiplying P1 A1, P2 A2, all the way till Pn An, and divide by total area. And this entire method is called as the method of isoheightal method for averaging the precipitation. I will give some examples that will help you concretize both the concepts of averaging precipitation using Thiessen polygon as well as isoheightal method. Now, continuing our discussion, let us also quickly look into a problem of estimating precipitation at any point x. So in last video, we looked into the case where we were checking for the consistency or removing error or finding the missing value in a watershed. However, let us say that there are 3 stations installed for lifetime, but somebody is deciding to build a big industry here, and he wants to know, based on the gauges located into watershed, that what should be the plinth level of the building that they are planning to build. So question arises, how we should estimate the amount of average precipitation that happens at that site on a given in a given year. Now we have measures at A, B, C. What we can do is that we can always weigh or assign some weights to the precipitation happening at A, and what would be the reduction that would happen from A to here, some weighing factor here, same weighing factor there, and we say that the best estimate of the precipitation at the point of interest x is simply amount of precipitation at A multiplied by weight, amount of precipitation at B multiplied by weight, amount of precipitation at C multiplied by weight, divided by W1 plus W2 and W3. So we can assign these weights in different ways. It could be simply inverse of the distance, and here by distance we can measure Euclidean distance, which is square of, again, x1 minus x2 square plus y1 minus y2 square. So and we can also say that instead of dealing with square, this w can also be taken as the square of the distance. Now the difference between this function is that the rate, as we get farther, the decay would be much faster, as we are proportionating it as 1 upon square of the distance. but the formula essentially remains same, that instead of dealing with x1 and x2 uh, and their square root, we are dealing with x1 minus x2 square plus y1 minus y2 square, and this is faster decaying as compared to the weights assigned by just proportionating it to 1 by d, where that would also mean that if our site of interest is closer to A, that means that we should totally weigh upon the values that we have observed at A to assign or ascertain that what design levels we should follow if we are accounting for precipitation in our infrastructure planning. Similarly, if our station is very far away from B, 1 upon dB square, that is distance of x from B and its square, would ensure that this value distance is very large, as a result of which this term 1 upon dB square would tend to 0, and very less or no weighting would be given to station B if it is very far away from the station B, and that's how we can estimate the missing values A. So one thing is for sure, that all the things that we have learned so far, they are representation of linear algebra or trigonometry or the understanding of locus that we understand in our high school or senior secondary classes, but we are putting it to some engineering use. And when we go into our next discussion, which would be on depth area curves and depth area duration curves, these concepts will become more clear from the engineering perspective. Thank you.